Welcome to today's video on note-taking methods with tips to having great notes. What is note-taking and why should you take notes? I'll give you guys a few minutes to write down why you guys think it's important to have notes and take notes, and then we'll go over why we need to do it and why we should do it. Okay, back to this. What is note-taking and why should you take notes? First off, note-taking is when you write down important information, whether it is from a textbook, a lecture, or other types of lessons or materials that are introduced to you in an educational setting. It doesn't just have to be an educational setting. It can be a meeting or something that has to do with your job or anything that you need for future references. You should take notes because it gives you a chance to review information or even study that information that you collected at later times. You will be able to use the information during tests, which are up to your instructor, or assignments that contain the information from the lesson that you learned that day you took notes from. What should you do and not do when taking notes? There's actually a couple things that you should do and should not do when you take notes. First of all, the do's are to make sure you use simple keywords or short sentences, have symbols to represent large words or meaning, make sure you use your own words. You want to use visual images and help you remember or understand information. Make sure you use the right note-taking method for you. These are all the to-dos because your don'ts are do not write down everything that you hear, read, or see. So you don't want to take forever writing notes and miss out on information, as you can see. And you don't want to make your notes all pretty and perfect during the lesson of the lecture, or you're going to get behind, miss out on important information, and not understand what you are currently learning. You don't want to write complete sentences. Do not draw or doodle on your paper when taking notes. You'll miss out on information like I've said before. Do not write random things that do not belong in your notes. Okay, now on to our next slide. Top 5 tips to having great notes. Tip number 1. One thing you should definitely do is to make sure you have a separate notebook for all your notes for each and every subject. The reason this is a great tip to have is because your notes could get jumbled in your assignment books. You could lose your notes or even misplace them in another notebook with a different class that doesn't even go to. Tip number 2. Make sure to use different color codes depending on a topic or chapter. And the reason for this is because when writing in just plain pencil or plain black pen, you get your information mixed up. And when you don't have a certain color for something, that's why you use black and red pens, you get information in the wrong section or you're reading the wrong section for whatever you need it for. Tip number 3. Use diagrams, abbreviations, and symbols. This is an amazing tip. These diagrams will take up less space and you'll less writing, and it'll give you a visual image. Abbreviations make it faster to write, and so do symbols. Tip number 4. Make sure when you use diagrams or make diagrams to color and label them. It is very important to do this. When you color a diagram and label it, it will give you specific information with very little writing or very little detail. Tip number 5. Use highlighters to mark important parts of notes. So say you're writing notes, you need to highlight the most important part. Do not just use one color highlighter or you're going to mix up all your information together. You want to use your pink, your blue, your yellow for different sections of important parts. Next, what type of note-taking methods are there? Cornell Notes. I know many of you guys probably heard of this in the classroom, whether it was from your English class or your science class or your writing class. Whatever class you took notes in, they probably suggested that you do the Cornell Notes method. So you write your notes and important things on one side and where on the other side you write what pages or diagrams and things like that. And at the bottom you give a summary of your lesson or what you took from your notes. A mind map. A mind map is having kind of like brainstorming. You have one main message, right, in the middle. And then from all other directions you have details and supporting things that go around it. That's another good way to write your notes as well. Then you have an outline, which is similar to writing. Lessons where you have to write out your outline before you write your essay. This is what this note-taking method is here. It gives you a section to write really about what you need, your important information, and you're splitting it up into sections. Next, continuing on to more note-taking methods, we have sentence note-taking methods. So it's just writing short, simple sentences, but with a lot of information in that short little sentence. Then we have a bullet point note-taking method, which is you have one main topic and you write a couple bullet points of simple phrases about what is important in that area. Then we have the slide method, which is you can draw a slide, a square. You can have the title of what you're doing, your bullet points, and then on the side you have your notes of what it looks like little details, but in the box you give more detail. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, examples how to write notes. So here's an example of the Cornell note method more in depth. So this gives you can see how they use different colors to separate their sections and important information here. They also use arrows and they also use very little wording. They made things short and simple. Then right here, this is also another way you can write notes. You can do it fancy to help you. Most people don't even like writing notes. So making it fancy like this and writing like this might make you want to study or make you look at your notes more. And so this also splits up your information into little sections as well. Then we have this sample. They use little doodles or diagrams on the side here for their key points and what they mean for over here in their other notes. So you could also use that of how to write a notes. So some other different ways to write notes, to write your symbols, abbreviations, and diagrams are right here. Here's an example of some symbols that you could use, or a color code that you could use as well for marking different things on your notes or what they stand for. Then you have some symbols here. You have the symbol and the meaning. You have which way they go, or simple meanings kind of like in math. But you can also use those symbols for other things as in your notes, whether it's science or reading, whatever else you are taking. Then you have some more abbreviations. Yes, there are more abbreviations and symbols than this. You are not just limited to what I am showing you on this screen. Just the same exact thing with the tips. You are not just limited to those tips. There's more tips out there, but those are the top 5 that I thought were great. Just the same thing with the examples of the pictures too. So here's another example of how a diagram, how they used cells for an example. They put the different types of cells and they put an example of what they look like, and they made little diagrams of going all the way down to the very bottom. And thank you for enjoying today's video on note-taking methods of how to take great notes. Here you can use these links to take you to the websites that I use to help me out. And if you want to more in depth on how to take notes, you may use these sources, and there are many more reliable sources out there. Thank you for joining me today in this video.